yes, yes, we are not denying where we are coming from, but we love where we are going, and we love who we are as Rwandans, and that's a vow that we've made.
Welcome to With You podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
I'm Tara, and
And
we're coming to you from not the same town
I get to be in the
again.
studio. Yes. What is going on with our travel
It's only our
nowadays?
second live to tape recording or whatever video recording, and I'm not even in
We're
the
in two
fancy
different
studio.
states. Yeah, we're in two different states. And not
That's
just
right.
emotional states, physical states.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not just states of being, but yeah, I'm in a different state, but it's good to see your face.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. I miss you a ton.
Yeah, I miss you too.
Well, at least we have this time together.
Always have the podcast.
We always have the podcast. And we're just inviting all the thousands of friends into
Yeah,
our
come in, join
come
us,
hang out with us.
hang out. It's just all of us here. Yeah, so, last time we talked about our trip to Kenya, and we promised at the end, it was just we couldn't even scratch the surface, really, of all
Yeah.
the things we did in Kenya.
And
So
it's always hard to tell how long we should talk about something.
well, yeah, it's always the problem of knowing when to stop. But we promised at the end that we would talk about Rwanda next. And so we are going to do that today. So first, maybe we'll tell a little bit about our time in Rwanda. But we also, most of this recording is going to be a session, an interview with one of our friends from Rwanda. So
Yeah.
we've invited
Well,
him in.
we'll get to talk to him, but let's talk a little bit about our experience in Rwanda because that was different than Kenya.
Yeah, and that was new to both of us. I'd never been there before, and
Yeah.
it's not terribly far from Kenya. But after being in Kenya and flying into Rwanda, it immediately, as we were landing, I'm looking out the window like, whoa, this is different. This is a new experience. It looks different. It feels different. And I mean, I guess I should paint a picture.
Yeah.
Um, it was very mountainous. And I
Which we
guess,
didn't anticipate or really
I mean,
know.
guess we should have known that because the mountains of Rwanda where people go gorilla trekking and in that lush mountainous area, that's all kind of I knew about Rwanda. But it's really mountainous, like everywhere we were in Rwanda, and we did a fair circle of the country, and it's
Yeah.
a small country, and it's really densely populated. So, like, flying in, just the construction of the houses looked different the way they were built. A lot of greenery, beautiful greenery, and we were told it's not the rainy season, so this is not even, like, lush like it usually.
Yeah. And just the creativity, people carrying things on their head, people carrying things on bicycles down the mountain. So just picture this. You're in the Rocky Mountains and someone's on a bike and all they have is extra rubber on the bottom of one foot to brake, and they're carrying how
I
much pounds of
I said
potatoes
500-pound bags of potatoes. Like,
flying
it
down the
was
mountain.
like it was a huge, tall load on the
I
back of
think we have a picture of that right there.
we may try to add some pictures, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that would be good.
If we can raise our technology level. But yeah, so yeah, like you said, that one of my first impressions was just colorful clothing. The women were dressed beautifully with headdresses and people carrying their loads on their heads, and yeah, trees and beautiful fabrics and
And we
mountains.
learned about banana beer.
We did. We didn't get to try any, but we
No.
saw a lot of people transporting banana beer.
Yeah, and got to visit churches and see lots of interesting ministries. But the thing that was the two things that were most startling for me was the mountains that I didn't know about the gorilla trekking, and so we drove from the airport up to
Oh,
the
okay, again,
boundary.
just like in Kenya, we never drove ourselves, but this
That's
time we
true.
had the treat of being picked up by a new friend, Emmanuel, um,
Yes.
who picked us up at the airport. And he is a church pastor, and this was a Sunday morning, and he missed his own church baptismal service to come pick us up.
Crazy. And he
So
just said, "The church is not my church, and so I'm picking you up and other people can run the service and
well,
baptize."
yeah, he just said there are plenty of other people who serve and can help. So we he drove us through the mountains. It was our first introduction to Rwanda, and he was an amazing host. Stopped for coffee. Rwanda has amazing coffee where we got to drive through the tea plantations of Kenya. That's another thing we noticed that was a difference in Rwanda. They're all about their coffee and the
Yeah.
amazing coffee. So we visited Emmanuel's church and then were treated to a meal in his home and met his lovely wife and his kids and other ministry people there. And so that was a really warm welcome.
Yeah, and it was great, and the drive was up, 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 up into the mountains.
Yeah, and we won't say that I did check on the altitude, what I said about Kenya, and I was right about Kajabi, but I'm not sure about the altitude. But that's the thing, like in Rwanda, the mountains are high and there's volcanoes, and you could see
Yeah,
the border into Congo because Congo shares a border with Rwanda, and you can see these volcanic mountains rising way above. So it's pretty dramatic.
yeah, it was fabulous, and the second thing that was amazing was the cleanliness. So there was the altitude and the cleanliness. You talked about the color of people's wardrobes and just the bright, vibrant colors in nature. The other thing was there wasn't a spot of litter or garbage, or it was
They have
just
community work
remarkable.
days where they clean things up. And so, yeah, it just felt very welcoming. And we met Manuel. And then the next day we met Pascal, who is also a ministry leader there and now a great new friend. And we also met his wife, who runs a clothing shop in their town, which was really fun. Got
Yeah,
to so yeah, we met some great new people. They introduced us. In fact, Pascal wanted to show us kind of the gorilla trekking area because we were up in that area where people jump off to go on these treks. And it's sort of like when we were talking about the safaris in Masai Mara, where it's a whole industry that people pay a lot of money for,
yeah.
tourism, and the gorillas are on that level, like hotels that cost thousands of dollars a night, which we didn't step foot in.
Nope.
But there's a nature center, like a conservation center that tells the story of the gorillas that's run by or funded by Ellen DeGeneres, which
Yeah.
was really weird to walk into a building in Rwanda and there's a big video screen that says, "Hi, I'm Ellen DeGeneres and I'm going to tell you about gorillas." And it was like, "Oh."
Yeah, it was a little cultural kind of jarring moment,
Yeah.
but it was really a great time, and then we also got to speak to a bunch of pastors through at the Navigators, compound. Navigators is a mission agency that does a lot of work with mentoring and discipleship, and so they hosted us being able to talk about burnout with pastors, and it was really remarkable to hear what everyone's doing and
Yeah,
yeah,
well, that's a good lead in to who we're going to talk to because it was hosted by our friend John Bosco Rumanzi, who
yeah,
was a student of yours in the marriage and family therapy program at Wheaton, and he just graduated in May. So we got to know him in Wheaton, and he lived in Wheaton while his family, his wife and two children, stayed in Rwanda because it wasn't possible for them to get visas to come with him. So it was amazing that he not just finished the program, but did really well studying marriage and family therapy and graduated. And then we got to see him in July a couple months after he graduated, and we thought, his story is just such a good way to encapsulate the story of Rwanda. Um, and because he studied systems theory, he's just been able to put a lot of it in perspective. His upbringing in a country that, as we learned, we talk about the beauty of Rwanda, but another thing that was very apparent when we got to know people there is that a huge part of Rwanda, still 30 years after a massive genocide in 1994, it's still a huge part of their background and their motivation to rebuild their country and their sense of dignity, and it's part of Rumanzi's story too. And so we thought it would be great to hear more from him
Yeah,
today.
so join us in welcoming John Bosco Rumanzi to the With You podcast. Right. Well, we're really excited to have our friend Rumanzi here with us on the podcast today. Good morning, good afternoon. What time is it in Rwanda?
Well, it's definitely a good afternoon. It's now 4 in the evening,
Oh,
4
wow.
p.m.
Okay. Well,
So
it's
yeah,
bright and early here. We're so glad that you could kind of take some time to talk with us.
yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I'm so honored actually to be in this conversation.
Yeah, for us, it's exciting because we got to spend time getting to know you in Rwanda only, what, I
A
don't
month
know,
ago? Was it a
about a
month?
month ago. And so we're excited to see you again, from a longer distance. But for the people who don't know you, we'd love for you to just kind of start by telling us a little bit about how we got to know you initially. So what brought you to Wheaton College Graduate School, and a little bit about your journey to marriage and family therapy.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and it starts with me getting married. I have I'm in ministry even now, and for the last, I think, 14 years,
Mm.
I've been in the Navigators. Then when I became a student ministry leader, I noticed that some of the students are graduating and they're getting married, and eventually I also got married. So, like, part of the first cohort who got married in the ministry, and then we realized there is not enough help around, no
Mm.
mentors, um, even those who are available, they are extremely busy. I'm talking about the pastors. Our
Yeah.
pastors here, they have a lot of work to do. And so this whole idea of marriage and following up, and as soon as they finish with you in premarital counseling, then you will figure out. Actually, I was lucky to be I was lucky to have a premarital counseling, which was like 2 months program at my church.
Okay.
Great.
And that was
But
that was an odd opportunity. That's not common.
no, it's not.
Oh,
Usually,
okay.
what happens is I come, the person comes with their fiance, and they sit with the pastor for 1 hour. They read 1 or 2 verses, and that's it.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So then I realized, wow, that's actually, when I got married, I think, I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe it's everybody. The first, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, it was rough. It was.
Oh, that's a
I,
shock.
I, I, yeah, I was shocked, not by my wife, but by myself.
Yeah.
I was shocked to see how I reacted to different things at home, and different, how I reacted to whatever was coming up. I used to think I am a very good Christian. I don't easily get angry, and this time it was terrible. I would be angry for a whole day, and I'm like, who is this?
Yeah. It stirs different things up when we have a deep commitment like that and we care so deeply, things get dusted up. And then you look at the other person. I often say this, and Tara and I, we looked at each other, go, oh, we're together every day,
Every day.
all the time. And that's
Right.
that can be stressful too.
I guess so. But then that was an alarm for me. I was like, yeah, I should look for people to help us out. And I started the journey to look for people to help. And I talked to people who are slightly like 5 years in marriage, and they would look at me and they're like, I would see in their faces, like, what do you want us to do with you?
Mm,
Like, just figure it out, right?
That we did figure out, so go ahead and figure out.
yeah.
I was like, from with the background of the Navigators, where we actually emphasize on mentorship and discipling, I was like, there's nothing like figuring out. I need help. I need someone to work with me. So eventually, I couldn't find really someone to work with me in the journey. And that's how I started the journey to look for. I was actually looking for pursuing a master's degree in biblical exchanges. For some reason, I came across MFT, Marriage and Family Therapy, on Wheaton College website, and I ditched everything. I was like, yep, this is what I need.
Wow.
Not for anyone, but for me.
That's incredible. So no biblical exegesis, straight to marriage and family.
Yep,
Well, and
that
I
was
think
it.
a lot of us get into the field wanting to kind of work on our own stuff as well as being equipped to work with others. So, and that was the start. Then you got into the program, you came to the US, and we got to spend 2 years in life together. And I was really amazed because I got to see you do premarital work, and you didn't just do a couple of verses thrown at people. You really challenged couples to know this is what it's going to be like, and are you up for the journey?
Yep. And that was interesting time. Now that you bring it back, I became what is the name? I think probably Dr. Smith probably at some point was like, you should not give premarital, you know, clients to
Well,
but it was
I
very
was
interesting.
super proud of you because yeah, Dr. Smith was telling me about half of the people that get premarital with Romanzi end up deciding not to get married. I'm like, that is good premarital work. It's not the 3 sessions and then you send them out and a year later they have problems. You're meeting the problems up ahead of time. So I actually thought that was good. But I think people are shocked when premarital counseling isn't just a stamp like,
On a
okay,
rubber stamp.
yeah, but hard work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Ramanthi, you made great sacrifice to come and move from Rwanda to we for that program because due to visas not being accepted, you weren't able to bring your own family with you, your wife and your 2 children. So we know that was a huge sacrifice for your family to come and get that training. So now that you finished and you're home, do you all feel like it was worth it?
Yes, yes. The answer is yes. Really, I feel like I've grown. Really, I've grown myself.
Mm.
Personally, I've walked a journey. I actually have a saying that I went to learn, but I ended up healed. So,
Mm, mm.
so yeah, I learned
Yeah.
and I healed.
Oh,
Well, and
So
that gives you the opportunity to then journey with others to help them learn and heal.
yes, yes, and I think that is the foundation for me to be able to work alongside others, as I wanted some people to work alongside me. Now I see why probably they didn't want to actually engage with me, because it's too much
Yeah.
for them, like for the people themselves. It's too much, and you can't just add someone when you still have your own things you're going through. And yeah, it was an opportunity to heal and learn, and also build the foundation to be able to help and work alongside others here in Rwanda.
Mm,
Yeah, we can't wait to see where that goes, because you're just at the beginning of that part of your journey. And so, but we want to kind of go back to one of the main reasons we brought you on, besides just getting to see your face again, is that we're talking in this season of our podcast a lot about the idea of pain and the function of pain in our lives, and pain in lots of different ways: physical, emotional, mental, even community pain. And we were so struck when we were spending time in Rwanda about the impact of the history of genocide and things that have happened in Rwanda. And we know that that's a big part of your story before we met you. So we'd love to hear more about that that journey, your story, your personal story of pain. And we know that it also, we don't ever want to talk about pain without talking about hope and healing, and we've already heard that's part of your story. So we'd love to hear more about where you came from before we met you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big question. That's a big question.
Oh,
I will. I was I was born in Uganda, and I was born as a refugee in Uganda, and that was because my parents, my father and my mom, left Rwanda uh, and went to Uganda as refugees uh, because they are persecuted here in Rwanda because of who they are. For mom specifically,
mm,
sorry, sorry. For my mom specifically, she was denied education opportunities. She did her primary school and finished and passed, and they would read her name, like, delete her name off the list and
mm,
put someone else. Because, yeah, because there was this idea that we can't have this much people from supposedly our tribe going to high school and ultimately to the university.
mm,
And because of that, she couldn't go to, she couldn't go to the higher schools. She couldn't join the army because there was a certain number of people who joined the army. So she decided to move to Uganda to look for, probably opportunities there. For my dad, after he lost his father in 1964,
mhm,
that is my granddad. He he lost his dad when he was very young, and my granddad died. He was burnt in his house
mm,
when his children are watching,
mm,
wow.
and burnt by his neighbors. But then during that time, they were only killing men. They were not killing women, and girls were killing men and boys. But for some reason, my dad hid under shrubs of peas, and he was there for probably a week, and he survived. Then those who survived, they realized their life cannot, there's no chance to survive in this country, and they all moved out. But they moved out. It was a time when it was like a mass movement of mostly Tutsis who were persecuted and killed by the Hutus.
mm.
Um, so
And
and
so this was so
that
this was in 1964 that this was happening.
yes,
And just
yes,
for I'm not really great with geography, but
yeah. So Rwanda is in the middle of Uganda in the north, Tanzania in the west, no, in the east, uh, Congo in the west, and Burundi in the south.
okay.
And in 1959, most people moved in different directions: west, south, north, and others remained in Rwanda. But those who remained in Rwanda were continuously persecuted, denied opportunities, and ultimately in 1994, the government then set out to actually wipe out the whole community of Tutsis.
Mm.
Over 1 million people died in 1994.
In 1 year. So then fast forward the
In actually,
continuation
in actually 3 months.
in 3 months.
Yeah. So it wasn't just an event that happened in 1994. It was, so my grandfather died in 1964. In 1959, some other people died. So it was a cumulative of an ideology of wiping out a certain group of people.
Yeah.
So that's how I was born in Uganda.
And then how long did you live in Uganda before you moved back to Rwanda?
So we came back in 1994 exactly during the war and genocide at the same time, but this time the labor group Rwanda Patriotic Front was fighting with the government, and whenever they capture a place, the refugees would move. And one of the reasons they were fighting the government was the government had denied us coming back. They said, the country is full. We cannot have any more people in this country. So stay where you are. You're not Rwandese, you're not Rwandans. And as any other people group, when they are denied their nationality, I guess they react. And the reaction was, so if you don't allow us to come by peace, we will actually come fighting. And that's what happened. They're like fighting for their right of, the right of their nationality and the country. So that's how we came. I was 6 years old when we came.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your story then growing up, and the events that happened that
It was rough. It was rough because, like I told you, I don't know my grandparents. I like my grandfather, both on my mother's side and my father's side. So my grandfather on my mother's side, he actually died in 1994.
Mm.
He did not die actually. He was killed in 1994. So both of them were killed, and so I came in, and they had to explain to me or to us why we actually don't have grandparents. So my grandfather, my grandmother on my mother's side, all of them, and my uncles and my aunties, and a whole really group of people. I think there were like 12 people on my mother's side. Now they're about 4 or 3. And so the whole thing of explaining to a child that you don't have you don't have a grandparents because this group killed them was really hard. Was hard. And growing up, now we came in a country that wanted to actually unite this group of perpetrators and this group that were victims, that have been killed, that have lost their parents and their grandparents. And it was rough because, like, how to even look into each other's eyes and have life together, be in the same class, be in the same school, like
yeah.
be in the same neighborhood. So it was really rough.
Yeah, with that, so there was generations of two groups kind of fighting each other that culminated in 1994. You were 6, had lost a generation, really, like your grandparents' generation, and even your probably your mom and dad's generation, for a
Mhm.
large part of Rwanda was killed off because Rwanda is not that large of a country. So when you say 1 million people were killed in 3 months, it's a 7 million, 6 million, 7 million population country. And so it's a huge part of the whole that was lost pretty
Mhm.
traumatically. And then you have to sit in class. So you come back in the aftermath of that. Your family moves back from Rwanda in the or to Rwanda in the aftermath of that. How did you how and you were explained things. How did you navigate friendships? Because the tension is an eye for an eye, right? Like you hurt me, I hurt you back. And it's hard to break that cycle. And yet our experience in
Mhm.
Rwanda is that cycle has been broken. It's
Mhm.
it's fascinating to Tara and I to really try to wrap our head around how did that happen, and what were the growing pains of that as a 6-year-old in primary school, and then as a young teen.
Yeah, that's now that I'm thinking about it. Um, when we are in school, no one is actually talking about our tribes.
Mm,
So we are in class, we're just kids. We and these are teachers, and but no one is really saying, "Hey, you are this or you're that," especially from the authority. I think for not being really political here, but the truth is the choices that were made by our government, and as a Christian, I think led by God,
mm,
was tremendously amazing in terms of bringing people together. I think there are choices. I mean, when you have power, right?
mhm,
You can use it to do whatever you want. And these people I'm talking about, their parents and their grandparents and their cousins and their aunties have been killed and have been denied rights for 30 years. But they come in and they choose not to revenge. They made the choice. It's like, if you do something like that, you end up.
cliffhanger, right? I mean, we get right to that spot.
I said, if you engage in revenge, you end up in jail. That was a command. The idea was, well, we've just lost over 1 million people. If we engage ourselves in killing one another, then we lose more. And then what happens when we lose more and then these people also run away and then they grow and they become stronger, they come back. So I think the choice was made to not do that.
Mm,
But there was also a dissection. Like, I don't know if you, I think DVD, you told me you've had chances to look at, people
yeah.
dissecting
Yep.
whatever it is they understand. There was this whole idea of like, let's look into what actually happened.
Yeah.
Who is the enemy for sure? Like, who is the enemy? How did this whole thing start? Are we actually enemies to one another? Do we hate one another that much that we end up killing one another? And the answer was no, because this was not how it was before colonialism, before the whole idea of divide and rule happened.
Mm,
So people went back to that idea of like, how did the hatred come about? How did we end up killing each other? I guess in identifying who the real enemy is, and the real enemy, I am not saying the real enemy is the people or the ideology itself. Uh, I think when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking about the ideology and the agents of the ideology.
yes.
Um, so there was such a deep sense of looking into what really happened, and then people realized we've been made to hate each other.
Mhm.
We've been made to, to kill each other. Yes, we participated. Yes, we grabbed onto this because of various reasons, but it wasn't the case in the beginning. And
So
when yes, go ahead.
there's hope in the challenging the system. So it's just really amazing, Ramanzi. You worked very carefully not to blame even the colonialists, right? That there's how do we move away from blaming one another to looking at the system and how the system is working to lead? It makes sense that it leads to violence, but that's a hard shift from, oh, I blame you, I'm angry with you, I'm going to take it out on you, versus, oh, our conflict is about something bigger, and how can we come together and challenge that? um
Mm.
how did that happen on a national level? And yeah, Tara, you had
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, because I was thinking the same thing as you were talking about that, Ramanzi, and making that choice to pull back. And it's something David and I talk about a lot, is a lot of what helps us get out of that cycle of being upset about something or misunderstanding something is pulling back and getting a bigger perspective. Like, what's really going on here? What's the motivation for this? Instead of just getting caught in that cycle of, like, that infighting or that hatred for somebody or that lack of forgiveness or the lingering pain of, like, what was the intention here? Why did this happen? And it sounds like that was a big part of the beginning of healing for Rwanda, is
Mhm.
everybody deciding, okay, if we're going to come back to our country, if we're going to still live in our country, we have to look at why this happened and make an intentional decision to live together and try to have peace. And it sounds like that was the beginning of it. But we know, because our visit was another 30 years later,
Yeah.
after 1994, another full 30 years. And just in our short week there, we could feel that the shadow of that is very large still, because the people are missing who were killed,
Mhm.
and that's a lingering reminder that those people are not there. Whoops.
Yeah, and the mentoring, right? Like, you started out your story, Ramanzi, about needing marriage mentoring, and there's a generation
I
gone. There's a generation that's gone
Yeah.
from the marriage mentoring. So even that, like, how does generation speak into generation?
Right,
Uh,
and that it seems to tie together too with that, David, when you were saying, we couldn't find mentors for marriage, part of the reason is that there's a lot of people missing, that you guys
Mhm.
have had to
Mhm.
recreate, that community. So, yeah, that's just throwing in all of our thoughts about this, but tell us more about how your family kind of dealt with that perspective and just moving forward with forgiveness.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, when there is actually political will, people follow. It's a thing. That's for me how I see it.
mm,
Um, because we knew that, at least, at least I don't have to go around pointing fingers saying, "Hey, look, you are this and that. Look, you like," and then and then as a family, we just fall into the whole bigger system.
Mm.
We fall into the whole bigger system. But what really helped a lot was, now there's a bigger purpose. Really, there's a bigger purpose. Like, people could. I was young, but I could see that people started feeling like, well, I think we have a country. I think we have a purpose to live for. I think we have to start engaging in farming and doing our work and start small businesses. We have children to pay for school fees. We we have a life to live. We are not we are no longer refugees to receive handouts. And there was a constant messaging of, hey, you have to restore your dignity as individuals and as a country. and people responded really. Uh, and what else happened was, moving forward, there was something called Gachacha Justice, which was, I've written a paper on it. I think you've read it. You've read it at some point, which was a transitional justice. And this transitional justice has two pieces in it. It's like we provide justice at the same time, providing avenue for forgiveness and reconciliation. So it's more like a conciliatory justice.
Mm.
And that was really powerful, because now when people know where their parents are buried, because after genocide, that was a big issue. People didn't know where their relatives are, because they're killed over and like everywhere, and people didn't know where to find them. So when this idea of reconciliatory justice started happening, people started to like showing and telling the truth of what happened. And as people get the closure of what happened to their parents, to their children, to their relatives, people start, start engaging in the idea of actually forgiving.
Mm.
But before that, I think it was hard. It was hard because people didn't have closure. They were still thinking, are my parents still alive? Are they really dead? Are my children, all of them, dead? And do we have some who are still alive? Then when this happened, this reconciliatory justice happened, people started opening up and actually started forgiving one another. I mean, forgiving. And the journey of reconciliation really, I think, begins at that moment when truth is coming out. And people are telling the truth because they know that even though they are going to receive punishment, it's going to be a lenient punishment, because we want them to come back in the society and build the society. Yeah.
So the punishment. So thinking about truth, justice, and forgiveness, the starting out with, we really need to acknowledge kind of a vulnerable openness individually and as a society of this is what happened, and not avoiding justice, but justice in terms of yeah, there's right and wrong, and this was a wrong, and yet the punishments are really about being back in community, back to what Tara was saying, that bigger picture of we're all Rwandans. We're more Rwandans than we are tribal, and there's a place for us to relate together. That's a powerful combination of truth, judgment, and reconciliation that I think we all need to look at in our own lives and societies. It's a challenge though. I get caught up in the justice side at times of like, this is not fair, and connect it to truth and don't think about reconciliation. It's just consequence.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. And I think it's hard. And I think what made it a little bit easier was that part of the truth, when in closure, when I come across the truth of what really happened.
Hmm.
uh, and the point when people are actually vulnerable and open to share and tell the stories of what really happened on the genocidal barriers, and on the killing camps and all those things that, yeah, when the survivors and the nation at large came to know and understand what really happened, it began that slight kind of light into, I can start the journey of forgiving. I can start the journey of reconciliation. And people, and at some people really were very genuine. I've had stories of people came and just cried and genuinely asked for forgiveness
Hmm.
Wow.
of what really happened. of what
That
they did.
the question I have too, Ramanzi, is we're talking about a lot of big concepts about, you know, forgiveness and restoration and these big things around something that's really raw. Like one of the hardest human pains, I think, is the pain of loss of loved one,
Mm,
and especially when it's wrongfully done, when a loved one is killed by another human. The rawness of that is what I keep thinking about and thinking about forgiveness. Like, where does that come from? I think a lot of people live their entire lives dealing with the pain of loss and not knowing, how do I get past, like, just the actual pain of the loss doesn't go away, that person is gone. And in the case of Rwanda, so many people are gone. It's a collective loss and a personal loss. Um, so how do you think that pain has, you're talking about people actually, not just the people who lost somebody, but the people who maybe perpetrated violence as well, and the pain of knowing that they were part of something really awful. How are people dealing with that? Do you see the lingering effects of that, like, personally?
um, yeah, that's a big question. That's a
I
big
mean,
question.
that's the biggest question
Yeah,
of being a human,
yeah,
right?
it
Like,
is. Yeah,
why is there pain and how do we deal with it? How do we move forward and acknowledge that the pain might never completely go away?
it is very hard. But I would say it was a progressive journey. I mean, not was. It is a progressive journey. Um, from observing the process, it seems like there is a point when we became numb, really, because we had to move forward.
Mm.
We had to, you know, uh, it's ashes. It's a desolate country. No one believes that it's going to to exist again. There are suggestions that Rwanda be divided and be put on these four different countries cease to exist, because sociologists and all these people are like, no, not in this world. These people cannot live together again.
Wow.
So, and there's all these social challenges, and there's pain, and there's loss of everything. So what happened? I think for a moment there was numbness. There was,
Mm.
let's power through. Let's see what happens. Let's power through. Let's move forward. Uh, and then progressively, I think people started. And the good thing is, we have every year in May, we start the commemoration period. And this, I think, this time is a time of mourning, and so it's a time that allows us,
Mm.
and specifically the genocide against Tutsis survivors and the whole country, to mourn and to reflect and to cry and um, to learn and to not to learn, to think through, not just be numb, but actually face the truth and face the reality of what happened to us. So this is, I think, it's a helpful process.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of pain, like, we have been progressively allowing ourselves to be open about it. People start talking about it, and but it is a progressive journey. I think it is still obvious that there is still pain, especially with people who are like, people who are born after 1994. They're like, where is my family?
Yeah.
Why do I have only you? And then people have to go and start explaining, this
Retell
happened,
the story
this
again.
happened. Yes, yes.
Yeah, the power of story was really, really evident. I mean, I even think about Tar when we were getting driven back from the hotel to the airport. our driver he's like, well, your plane's not leaving for too long. Let's go to the memorial. And wanted to take us to the genocide memorial, and we're like, we really need to get to the airport. And he's like, well, then he told us about 32 family members that were killed, and he told us his story. And as you're talking, I realized, oh, that was part of the cultural process of healing. He was inviting us in to the process of letting. He's like, I am starting my whole family branch new. It's just me, and I have to build my family. So he was using the story to process, but also to share of a continuation, almost like accountability of like, I want to tell you so that we hold this together. It was a beautiful, it was the best taxi ride I've ever had. But it was hard. It was
Yeah.
hard to hear. It was painful. But it was
Mm.
telling the story together. And I think about the work you do, Tara, telling story, dealing with trauma, kind of the retelling, getting into to what Rumanzi was saying, the open and vulnerable. Like, storytelling is powerful in processing pain.
Yeah, and the truth is, I mean, I know that it's true in Rwanda that a big percentage of people living there are living with PTSD because most people have some story of escaping violence or, you know, some hard stories. And yeah, there is a lot of power in the retelling now in a safe time and retelling that story and reorganizing it in your brain and um, making the choice to move forward the way you have,
Mm.
and not
Mm.
just putting it like it's interesting that you say you lived in this numb place for a while, like suppressing it in order to just we've got to move forward and rebuild. But then at some point, those stories need to be retold.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think another thing for me from my own observation is uh, the idea of hope. The idea of hope is for somehow not really take away the pain, but helps people actually deal with it.
Hmm.
Because at this point, people are like, I mean, I'm thinking about people are thinking, well, we have a country, things are happening, and no one, at least everybody feels like no one is going to, no one is denying me of any of my rights in this country. Um, and I mean, yes, we have limited opportunities, but they are shared opportunities. And so, be it education, I think that whole sense of hope,
Mhm.
um, it really helps us like move through, not even move through, like deal with the pain. It's like, yeah, I have a life to live tomorrow. And yes, I acknowledge this because every year we come back and acknowledge it
Mhm.
for 3 months with one specific week specified for commemoration of genocide against Tutsis. So, and that is, but that coupled with the hope and what we see happening. I mean, I lived through the whole 30 years in this country, except for the 2 years that I was in the US. But I've seen progress with my own eyes.
Hmm.
I've moved from standing under the tree, at least, for example. Most of us, our classes were under the tree,
Yeah.
under the trees, sitting on the stones. Now, when to a point where we have more than enough, you know, classes
Yeah.
and
So you're
schools
saying
everywhere.
your school was all outdoors initially. You were sitting
Mhm.
literally under the trees, and now your kids all have classrooms and yeah, so there's been like just progress in infrastructure and building,
Mhm.
rebuilding, literally rebuilding. What else? You say have hope. What else? What do you have hope in? Like, where does one find that hope? You're talking to somebody else who's in the middle of pain. where it sounds like you're just like with your government building new ideas and community spirit and stuff. That's one thing. It sounds like
That
you're
So,
that child does not have hope right now.
somebody's illustrating
right.
right now.
I am. Is
Yeah,
coming
we
through?
could hear that sad angry child.
You have somebody nearby your office
So,
space who's having a hard time. But yeah, but tell us more about where does one find that? If you're feeling hopeless and you're in pain, where
okay.
does that
So,
normally come from?
um, now I will talk as a believer, and I'll say that, honestly speaking, apart from good policies, which I also think really God had a hand in it,
Mm,
most Rwandans are really spiritual people, mostly Christians. And we've had, although the church have had, like, the church has disappointed the country in terms of, I mean, I didn't go through all the history, but the church, especially, those who came with colonialists, have had a big hand in whatever happened right after in sowing the ideology of divide and rule. But after the genocide against Tutsis, the church have had a hand in actually restoring hope for people and building a sense of community. And and I would say, even up to now, I mean, my personally, that's that's the hope. That's the hope. I have a big hope in my, in God and Christ, that He has a purpose for this country. And people have been talking about it, like, Rwanda is going to be the light of Africa.
mm.
Rwanda is going to be, all these things. And we have seen it. And we have seen it. I would say most of us really run to God
Yeah.
for hope.
So the hope that you have isn't the hope of human. It's really like, oh, we understand we're loved by God. We see that through Jesus, and that gives us hope to then lean into the pain, lean into the conflict, and try to do it in a way that's based on appreciating the value of the other human being because God values you.
I think that's a big part of who Rwandans are. Unfortunately, we didn't that we in 1994, it was terrible that a whole country that is 90% Christian engaged in genocide against Tutsis, but it's a part of the fabric of who we are.
Yeah.
Even when people actually moved away for a while.
I have to say too, just this is our just very short observation of our time. We know you to be a person who loves to laugh and loves to have fun. See, there's that smile.
Love
And
it.
so does your wife, Florence, and most of the ministry leaders we met in Rwanda. So, we love the idea of finding the lightness and the humor and the playfulness to offset the heavy things in our lives. Does that play a part for you? Like, wh- how do you have that light spirit about you?
Well, I, I honestly, I don't know if this is a general thing, uh, but I think I mentioned something about community. When we started, when these institutions started, happening, like, we started doing our marriages and our weddings the way and the sense of, and a- apart from God, also people really meet over drinks and over, sports and over, like, all these things, and music. Rwandans love music. Rwandans love entertainment. Rwandans love. I mean, you should be, when I hope you see you are in one day in a Rwandan wedding. You'll be, it's the most beautiful thing you can ever see.
Mm.
So there is that whole, all those things really bring hope because people start saying, well, yeah, I think things are happening, things are moving. Um, yeah.
So what is the kind of wrapping up? What is the message that you have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old? How do you communicate to them some of the history, but also the joy and the hope and the moving forward, both as a family, but kind of representative of what's happening in Rwanda for the next generation, the next generation coming up?
Well, that's another good question, which technically means a hard one. I think that is one of the hardest things that is happening, communicating our history, which is really full of, which is a burdensome history, but also keeping the joy and the happiness and the hope. Uh, for me personally, I have vowed that I will never talk about tribe in my house. I That is a vow. It doesn't happen. There's nothing. We don't. There's nothing like that. I have,
So there's
and
no
I talk
there's
about,
no connection for you and Florence with tribe. It's we're Rwandan for the kids, not that we come
yes,
from a certain
yes,
tribe.
yes. Yes, we are not denying where we are coming from, but we love where we are going, and we love who we are as Rwandans, and that's a vow that we've made, and that's one. Two, we just we haven't talked about it really.
Hmm.
We haven't talked about it, but I think when we start talking about it, we will be talking about what I talked about on this podcast. What really happened, not just what followed.
Yeah.
Mm.
Starting from the beginning, not in the middle.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
starting earlier in the 1950s, not in
Mhm.
1994.
Yeah. Yeah. We were messed up by an outside force,
Yeah.
Mm.
but
Yeah.
that is not who we are.
Well,
Mm.
I'm thankful for the messages that that I've learned from you because I think we can learn a lot. I think human nature is to other and to kind of divide, to navigate conflict, and um, your your stories and the stories of Rwandan kind of culture are really helpful, giving hope to me in how I navigate difficult political times and difficult
Mhm.
times in churches here in the U.S. I think it's universal of this restorative justice, this transformational justice. So I'm thankful for you taking the time and taking the risk and telling the story to us and everyone listening.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for having me, and I'm very happy to share the story. And well, anytime.
Yeah. Thank you, Romanzi.